22nd of May 1944, 01 degrees 40 minutes north, 00 degrees 00 minutes east, 150 degrees 31 minutes east. North of the Admiralty Islands, the Pacific lies like black glass, a skin stretched drum-tight over depth. In the hush, a junior sonarman aboard USS England DE 635 leans into his headset until the rubber cups pinch. The ship's hull murmurs. The ASW team has stripped to dungarees in the warm night, hands resting near the firing key for the forward projector. On the scope, a patient green trace creeps, and every few seconds the measured ping climbs the bulkhead like a heartbeat. The men have drilled this sequence until muscle remembers what nerves would forget. Radar to sniff the box, sonar to hold the whisper, helmsman to fly the attack leg that puts steel out in front, never over the contact where propeller noise would drown the truth. The new mortar still feels like wizardry. Depth charges roar even when you miss, a noisy lie that steals minutes and smears the water with bubbles. The Hedgehog's contact fuses tell the truth or say nothing at all. Truth or silence. It is a hard bargain sailors can live with. Far away in Pearl Harbor, a codebreaker taps ash from his cigarette over a hand-drawn grid labelled NA and would have recognised the geometry closing here. On England, the sonarman tastes metal at the back of his mouth, that curious tang concentration leaves when jaw muscles lock. Bearing rate smooths. The target slides across the trace, there, almost gone, there again, like a fish teasing the hook. "Stand by," the captain says, voice quiet enough to unshake hands. Ordnance men seat 24 rounds the colour of dusk. Safety pins tug free. Grease smells like pennies. The ship steadies. Spray ghosts across the bow. The firing key goes down with a dry, unforgettable click, and spigots cough in rippling order. 24 white plumes arc, lift and fall in strict geometry that turns the sea into a grid. Counting begins under breath, 1 Mississippi, 2, 3, because with this weapon silence means a miss, and sound means contact. They are citizen sailors, kin to the welders and crane operators who sent them, and they understand the exchange. Hold your nerve, and the ocean will speak back. The sonarman tightens his headset by instinct, as if a millimetre could make the sea louder. He knows the next minute may decide whether a line on a map stays lit or goes dark forever, and he listens for the proof that will turn rumour into wreckage and mark the beginning of a very long night. Dawn leaks into Seidler Harbour, Manus, carrying the smell of fuel, hot rope and wet wood. A CB stevedore, freckled forearms, pencil stub parked over one ear, walks a dock ledger with a priest's attention. England noses alongside with the faint burn of cordite on her breath and paint scuffed white where waves have worried her waterline. A crane hook squeals over a pallet of Hedgehog projectiles. Men in dungarees and boondockers steady the swing with gloved hands, knuckles black from winch grease. The checklist reads like ritual. Secure forward magazine. Top off fuel. Black snakes of hose muscling over lifelines. Swap out tired gear. Sound-powered headsets, fuses, a cracked Polaris lens. Ordnance checks lot numbers with board efficiency born of practice. A hedgehog round rides a sailor's arms like a blunt-nosed infant, promise heavy in the hands. Coffee earns hiss in the shade as a messman deals tin cups. Somebody jokes that the Pacific Fleet runs on beans, torpex and air. The CB has seen storms blow in and blow out, and he recognises this other weather, tempo. Throughput is the weapon you never see in a recruiting poster. By 1944, American yards have launched destroyer escorts by the hundreds. The war's final tally will crest around 563. Across the entire conflict, Japan will field roughly 174 ocean-going submarines in total. A single American program, the DE Force alone, outnumbers the enemy's deep-sea underworld. That impossible arithmetic hides in small motions. A forklift's cough, a boatswain's whistle, pencil initials beside a crate number. A lieutenant from Ordnance signs the last chit and tucks it under his cap against sweat. He respects the math without romance. 24 projectiles, each carrying about 30 to 35 pounds of Torpex, are not poetry. They are probability made physical. The faster they move them, the more often certainty will visit the night. England's deck gang stows the final crate and singles up. Lines come inboard. The screws beat a soft, eager thrum through pilings and bones. The CB leans on the rail, tasting salt, watching the DE ease away like a city bus leaving on time. Route chalked in grease pencil, destination a set of coordinates and a signal the codebreakers have already read. He flips his clipboard to a fresh page for the next hull sliding in and thinks, with no flourish at all, keep them moving, and the ocean will keep the score. Hours earlier by Tokyo time, and forever behind the events that will close his story, a Japanese watch officer aboard a Roe 100 class submarine finishes a trim dive and rolls his pencil between two fingers. Condensation purls along the piping. The boat settles at periscope depth. Batteries breathe their slow chemical sigh. He notes calm sea, traffic nil, station maintained. The NA line, eyes across the mid-Pacific, exists to warn of the hunters now nosing toward it. He believes in the syllabus that made him: battery husbandry, silent running, drill until even anxiety can do it in the dark. The boat is competent, even elegant in its way. Row class, about 600 tons on the surface, 780 submerged, 4 bow tubes, 8 torpedoes total, test depth in the neighbourhood of 75 metres. Crew count rides between 38 and the mid-50s as the war wears on. He knows the numbers like catechism because numbers keep you alive. Kilowatts left in the cells, meters to spare under the keel, minutes until air tastes stale. When orders set them to picket duty, he accepted the irony, vigilance measured by nothing happening. It is respectable work, if not glorious, a post where a professional's reward is returning with a blank log. Yet the ocean does not care for pride, and industry cares less. He cannot see Manus or smell its fuel or hear the forklift coughs, but those invisible sounds judge him harder than any admiral. In the Republic, he has been taught to despise as soft civilian hands have built a fleet of destroyer escorts so numerous that the type alone exceeds the total ocean-going submarine force his nation will field in the entire war. That is the impossible statistic. One American class outnumbers an enemy arm. Ship for ship, he is not outclassed by courage or seamanship. He is outnumbered by factories. He adjusts the scope and logs a cloud bank smothering the moon. Below, his sonar man, trained differently, equipment poorer, listens to a sea that seems only sea. Above the line, out of sight and intention, an American sonar man is learning the taste of metal that attention leaves. The watch officer caps his pencil, places his palm on varnished wood, sticky with salt, and accepts. The small virtue of a page with nothing to report, not knowing that far away a clerk has underlined his call sign twice. Back to local night, 22nd May 1944, and the ocean has been taught to speak in seconds. England steadies on her attack leg, screws whispering as throttles hold the precise speed the plot demands. Bearing rate smooths, bow lifts, and the bridge is a quiet engine of decision. "Shoot," the captain says, almost bored, because bored keeps hands from shaking. The firing key clicks, the mortar's barrels ripple, 24 bombs arc forward and kiss down with a dainty precision that makes the violence to come feel impolite. 1 Mississippi, 2, 3. The sonarman's mouth dries into paper. 4, 5, 6, 7, and then a flat, hard crack under the hull. Not the rolling thunder of a depth charge, but a hammer inside a bell. A long, grumbling growl follows through steel to bone. Men let out breaths they did not know they held. A junior officer swallows and says, voice steady by will, "Hit." The skipper nods once and orders the ship round for a second pass to be sure. Dawn will mark the spot with colours too pretty for what they mean. Oil slides over the surface in black to rainbow swirls. Cork floats. Varnished wood slats ride the swell like toys now ownerless. There are no survivors. In deep water there seldom are. The log will place the sinking near 01 degrees 40 minutes north, 150 degrees 31 minutes east north of the Admiralties. Post-war records fix the victim as RO 106, complement 49 souls. The sonar man, awake for 20 hours and awake in a different way for 21, tries not to picture faces as he logs bearings and times with the neatness of a schoolboy. What has happened feels like a trick the first time because the hedgehog overturns old sailors' lore. Depth charges raw whether you earn it or not, fogging the trace and forcing wagers. A contact-fused pattern tells the truth and lets you correct instantly. Truth is a weapon when you can afford to throw enough of it. The ordnance gang counts spent cases, chalks racks, and the OOD writes the number where anyone can see. Radio stays guarded, but the message moves along the chain, one picket down on NA. In Pearl, a pencil draws a small X over a pin. England steadies for the next box, the next whisper on the wire, as the day grows bright over a patch of sea that now remembers a small submarine coming apart in the dark. 23 May brings a different sea and the same pulse. North-northwest of Kavieng, the contact slides off bearing as if it can smell the geometry closing around it. England works with USS Raby, DE 698, and USS George, DE 697, 3 comb teeth raking the box. The first hedgehog pattern goes out and the crew listens to the contract again. Silence. Miss. Raby runs in. Silence. Miss. George corrects on bearing rate. Silence. Miss. Nobody flinches. Across a squawk box, voices trade bearings like sheet music, while the Barthy thermograph cools and scribbles a temperature curve. Layers bend sound, and men who hunt with sound gruff their water first. Numbers write the music. By the time England steps in again, roughly 10 salvos have laced the water. Raby 4, George 4, England 2. Something on the order of 2 140 contact bombs spent to erase one threat that carries only 8 torpedoes. Waste to an economy of scarcity. Doctrine to a nation that turned foundries and assembly lines into instruments and taught crews to play them without flourish. On the second England salvo, the sea answers with that flat, unmistakable crack and the long underwater growl that means a pressure hull is making a sound it was never designed to make. Hours later, wreckage rises. Men lean over lifelines and point, a slat of varnished wood, a cork float, oil with the sweet, wrong smell that clings to clothes and hair. The position will be logged roughly 250 miles north-northwest of New Ireland. Post-war records will fix the boat as RO 104, complement about 58. In the sonar room, a junior tech draws a neat diagram of bearing changes in his notebook as if transcribing a melody. He will keep the page for years, a private chart of how fear became rhythm. A messenger brings coffee that tastes like the tin it came in, hot and grateful. Somebody jokes that counting Mississippis ought to be written into fleet doctrine. The captain gives a minute for the thermograph to spit its final line, then taps the chart with a knuckle. Another box waits. At Manus, before the formal signal arrives, the ordnance gang is laying out more crates because stories move faster than traffic. In Pearl, a codebreaker crosses a second pin off his board and writes a note in the margin. 3 consecutive nights are now possible. 24. May arrives under cloud, the moon a smudged coin, the sea does not bother to return. North of the Admiralties, the air is warm enough to make shirts a suggestion and sweat an argument. Inside a row-class boat, the watch officer tastes battery acid at the back of his throat and calls for remaining charge. The figure does not comfort. Test depth is too shallow to become sanctuary. Somewhere above, a ship he cannot hear refuses to drive over him and will throw steel ahead instead. On England, the geometry is routine. Radar for first sniff, sonar for the hold, an attack leg that puts the pattern out in front. The Mk-10 Hedgehog throws 24 contact-fused bombs roughly 250 yards, an ellipse of arguments that detonate only if they deserve to. Silence means a miss. If silence answers, the helmsman will jog a few degrees, the sonar will freshen the bearing, and the crew will count again. It is the counting that writes the heartbeat of this chapter. 3, 4, 5, 7. Then the thin, hard crack, followed by the low, grumbling complaint of structure failing in a place designed to hold breath, not explosions. Men in England do not cheer, they exhale. Oil will come at dawn, and likely nothing else. Post-war records will place the sinking north of the Admiralties and fix the boat as RO 116, complement about 56. In Pearl, 3 pins gone in 3 mornings, redraw a map Tokyo had trusted. A picket line intended to grant minutes and miles has been shortened to 0 by a contact-fused argument between sonar, nerve, and industry. Here is the impossible statistic rendered as method, not boast. In 13 days, this single destroyer escort will account for 6 submarines, and in 3 consecutive nights, she and her consorts will blind an early warning chain that was supposed to save a fleet. American production behind the feat is so vast that even this morning's expenditure, scores of contact bombs against a boat carrying only 8 torpedoes, registers as procedure, not extravagance. By first light, a slick lies long and ugly in the swell. A boatswain squints into it and quietly hopes for the impossible, then does not find it. England steadies on a new course. In Tokyo, a staff officer waits for a report that will not arrive. In Pearl, a pencil draws a box around a gap and writes one plain word in the margin: blind. Manus wakes before the sun, and the harbour smells like fuel, rope, and hot metal. England noses in with racks light and tempers steady, the way a bus hits a stop on time. A CB stevedore runs his finger down a dock ledger, initials chits, and waves a crane onto a pallet of blunt-nosed hedgehog rounds. The ritual would look ordinary if the stakes weren't written outside the harbour in oil and wreckage. Men move with the choreography of habit, hoses snake aboard, magazines open and close, lot numbers get checked aloud, coffee pots hiss and bless the living. The conversation is half jokes and half inventory. Beans, torpex and air, someone says, an old truth that still earns nods. By 1944, this is what victory looks like, throughput. Destroyer escorts have been launched by the hundreds from American yards. The tally will crest around 563 by war's end. Those numbers do not swagger here, they simply arrive on pallets and schedules. England singles up lines, and the screws hum that eager liquid thrum through water and bone. The CB watches her resolve into a diminishing triangle, pencils a fresh page for the next hull, and thinks of time as a weapon. The ocean accepts the schedule. On 26th May, England is back on the plot lines. The sound room is cooler than the air outside, headphones slick against the skull. Bearing rate steadies. The helmsman rides the attack leg as if he'd carved it with a knife. The Mk-10 Hedgehog is not dramatic. It is decisive. 24 projectiles walk out ahead in a neat ellipse that must earn its thunder. Silence means a miss and invites a correction, not despair. Raby and George are near enough to matter, far enough to keep the geometry honest. Somewhere below, a row-class boat carries 8 torpedoes and the dignity of good seamanship into a fight already chosen by strangers with cranes and ledgers. The first salvo goes quiet. The second earns its verdict. A flat, iron crack beneath the hull, followed by the sullen, resonant complaint of steel forced past design. Hours later, if wind permits, the slick will tell the rest. Post-war records will list RO 108 gone with all hands. The men aboard England will put down only what they can prove, times, courses, sounds heard and verified. They will eat sandwiches that taste of salt and tin, wipe oil from their sleeves and recalibrate the thermograph, because layers bend truth and truth matters. Back at Manus that evening, forklifts cough and booms creak. and a stevedore stacks more certainty by the ton. He does not say history. He says, "Next truck," and the line advances. End of May writes its last lines in grey light and persistence. The contact won't shake. Escorts have been turning on it for hours, trading bearings across squawk boxes, writing the sea like sheet music. The little carrier Hoggett Bay rides nearby, air crews alert and watchful, her presence a promise that the hunt can outlast any single man's nerve. England's bridge is spare and patient. Coffee is black, orders are quiet, and the attack legs keep arriving at the exact moments the plot demands. A junior sonarman rubs the ache from his jaw and listens for the harmonic that tells him they haven't lost the thread. He does not think of fame. He thinks of not being the one who blinks. The radio breaks the hour in an easy drawl a man might use to ask for a light. The permission comes with a shrug you can hear. "Oh hell, go ahead, England." It is the sentence of a confident navy, the kind of casual that takes years of practice and thousands of pallets to earn. The firing key finds its travel. The Mk-10 speaks in white fountains arcing forward and landing with fussy precision. Silence measures out the seconds in cotton-mouth and counting. Then the crack, thin, punishing, conclusive, followed by the long, grumbling roll that means internal bulkheads are confessing. There is no cheer. There's an exhale, a pencil scratching a time, a course, a neat check mark you could mistake for unfeeling if you didn't know how much feeling lies beneath control. This is 31st May, the end of a 30-hour chase that has pulled in ships and aircraft and men whose names will never see a headline. Post-war records name the victim RO 105, lost with about 55 souls. The escorts circle long enough to be certain. Certainty is the currency they carry. Hoggett Bay's planes bank and return to pattern. On England, ordnance counts empties. The OOD checks the thermograph one last time, and the captain lets his hand rest on the chart like a benediction. They have removed the last pin from a line that was supposed to save a fleet, and they have done it by method, not miracle. When England eases her bow toward Manus, racks lighter and reputation heavier, the sea is oddly placid, as if secrecy had been its ally and is now bereft. The radio goes quiet again, and the hunt's noise distills to screws beating water and the low talk of men who know they will be hungry soon. In Tokyo, a staff officer waits for a sighting that would normally arrive like rain in a wet season. He taps a pencil against a blotter and watches a wall map that cannot answer him. The NA line, his early warning tripwire for Operation Ago, has misbehaved in a way maps seldom do. Nothing comes in. He does not yet see absence as information. Far across the ocean, Pearl's plot room smells of paper, cigarettes, and eraser rubber. A codebreaker leans over a hand-drawn grid and marks 3 mornings in a row where pins went dead. He writes a word in the margin that would have sounded like drama if it weren't so accurate: blind. The timeline is tight enough to feel inevitable. 19th May, I-16 gone. 22nd May, RO 106. 23rd May, RO 104. 24 May, RO 116. 26 May, RO 108. 31st of May, RO 105. 6 submarines in 13 days, 3 on 3 consecutive nights in the middle of the sequence. None of it reads like a legend from a distance. It reads like a schedule kept. The escorts worked the doctrine they'd practiced: radar for first sniff, sonar for the hold, ahead throwing patterns to avoid their own noise. The Hedgehog's contact fuse turned the ocean into a lie detector, granting instant feedback that let ships adjust without wasting minutes and decibels. The thing that seems impossible to civilians, expenditure that would feel like extravagance anywhere else, was procedure here. In a single hunt, roughly 10 salvos laced the water before one boat finally died. Hundreds of contact bombs to erase a threat that carried 8 torpedoes total. Waste where scarcity rules, certainty where a free people can afford to buy it. And there is the larger impossibility, the statistic that makes officers blink even when they've seen it in print. The United States built on the order of 563 destroyer escorts in the war years, a single program already outnumbering the entire set of ocean-going submarines Japan would field across the conflict, roughly 174. One class versus an enemy arm. That arithmetic is not boast. It is doctrine translated into steel by democracy's factories. With NA erased, carrier task forces move through a corridor that would have bristled with early warning. The Marianas are coming into focus like a bright shore after fog. Airfields on Saipan and Tinian imply long-range bombers. Long-range bombers imply pressure where the war began. The codebreaker rubs a thumb over smudged graphite and circles the gap one more time, as if trying to make the emptiness permanent. He lights another cigarette and whispers the word he wrote earlier, not for drama this time, but as a weather report. Blind. After-action reports clack from typewriters with the indifferent rhythm of office work. Carbon paper smears fingers blue, staples bite corners, copies stack in wire trays that make war look like bureaucracy. In the neat boxes of those forms, the story resolves into counts and coordinates. England's ledger for late May and the first day of June is brutal and exact. 6 submarines in 13 days, 3 on 3 consecutive nights, positions logged, bearings noted, patterns fired and confirmed by the sound that admits no argument. Post-war reconciliations give the enemy their names and numbers. I-16, RO-106, RO-104, RO-116, RO-108, RO-105. Casualty figures for these sinkings sum to something north of 325 souls, a number that never gets easier to look at even when the math explains the necessity. Weapon performance has its own column. The Hedgehog, Model 10 and Model 11, throws 24 bombs in a forward ellipse, each carrying roughly 30 to 35 pounds of Torpex, detonating only on contact. Analyses conducted during and after the war would place its kill probability per attack far above the depth charge patterns it replaced, sometimes summarized as 1 effective kill in roughly 5 well-placed runs versus depth charge success down around 1 in 60 or worse, depending on conditions. The reason is simple, unromantic, American. Truth is cheaper than noise when you can mass-produce it. Contact fuse means you know. Knowing means you correct. Correction means the ocean stops favouring the hunted. On another page, production lines translate into hull numbers. Destroyer escorts, Buckley class among them, roll from yards like precise arguments turned into rivets and welds. The war's final DE tally hovers around 563. The Japanese ocean-going submarine force across the entire conflict will tally roughly 174. Those figures feel like a printing error until you watch a crane swing a pallet into a magazine with the boredom of routine. The ledger in Pearl adds another invisible column, intelligence. Decrypts cued the hunters, turning NA into a list of addresses. Men who never heard a shot fired drew boxes for others to turn into slicks at dawn. The line items are cold, the meaning is not. The reports do not gloat. They prefer verbs like engaged, fired, evaluated, confirmed. In the margins, men sometimes write one word not meant for history: certain. A clerk staples the last page, straightens the stack, and slides it into a folder that looks like every other folder. The ordnance officer wipes graphite from his thumb onto a rag and steps outside where the air smells like rope and tide. He looks toward the empty horizon and thinks of numbers turning into lives kept. The mess deck is quiet after watch, tin mugs upside down on tables, a coffee ring drying into a map of nowhere. A sonarman sits with his headset around his neck and rubs the red circles it leaves, feeling foolish for the tenderness and grateful for it too. He will not brag later. He will say what sailors say when the work was done right. We held our water. We did our job. He will remember how the sea grows loud inside the skull after a hit, the flat crack, the long growl. and how a man learns to be still so that his hands do not tell stories his mouth shouldn't. He will wash oil from his sleeves and find the smell again days later when the shirt goes back to the laundry bag. He will write home about chow, weather, and a buddy who plays harmonica badly. He will never write about counting Mississippis in the dark. Across a lifetime and an ocean, an archivist would later unfold the final page of a Japanese log recovered by circumstance and care. The watch officer's handwriting is neat and restrained. He records trim dives and weather and the small virtues of professionalism. Where the ink stops, the story does too, not because of cowardice or error, but because a system built for certainty found him. Honour is not a prize the victor denies the defeated. The better the enemy, the truer the victory. The archivist closes the file and writes a catalogue number that keeps a human life from dissolving into a statistic. On a different day, in a different office, Fleet Admiral Ernest J. King says a thing that will become both promise and inheritance. There'll always be an England in the United States Navy. Later, a guided missile cruiser will carry the name Steel Remembering Steel. Veterans will shake hands at reunions in VFW halls that smell of coffee and floor wax, men grown rounder and greyer who still count beats under their breath when a train passes. They will laugh too loud at old jokes and then fall quiet together when someone reads names. The ledger of steel is nothing without the ledger of blood, and the marriage of the two is what makes remembrance honest. When the ship pitches gently and the lights hum, the sonarman lets his head fall back and listens to the peace a well-kept watch earns. He hears only ship and sea, which is to say, life. He thinks of sleep as a kind of duty and takes it. The war moves on, but the week remains, a template folded into manuals and minds. In classrooms ashore, instructors chalk sonar cones and ahead-throwing envelopes, teaching the geometry that turned rumour into wreckage. The lesson is not about heroics, it is about iteration. Radar sniffs, sonar holds. The firing solution walks out ahead so screws and hull do not drown the truth. The Hedgehog's contact fuse cuts through the superstition of noise, and crews learn to love the silence that lets them correct. Later tools will join the orchestra, airborne search, acoustic torpedoes, sonobuoys. But the melody remains the same. Technology harnessed to doctrine, doctrine scaled by production, production sustained by a free people who understand why they labour. It is fashionable to call numbers cold. In this story, they are warm with fingerprints and coffee rings. A single American ship class, destroyer escorts nearing 563 hulls, outnumbers the enemy's ocean-going submarine arm across the entire war at roughly 174. One morning's ordnance laid against one boat's 8 torpedoes feels like excess until you remember what certainty saves. Convoys arriving, Marines landing with rifles dry, carrier decks clear to launch. The impossible arithmetic that shocks classrooms today was daily weather then. A forklift beeped, a crane swung, a bosun's whistle shrilled. A nation aimed itself and kept firing until outcomes bent. Doctrine changes quietly after triumphs like this. Ahead throwing ASW becomes standard. Training bakes in bathythermograph discipline and counting seconds like monks count prayers. Integration with escort carriers ceases to be improvisation and becomes plan. Intelligence is not garnish now. It is the first ingredient. The men who lived the week do not speak in theory. They talk about a firing key's travel, a chief's hand on a shoulder, the taste of metal concentration leaves when you clamp your jaw too long. They accept medals because someone has to, and they accept that the better honour lives in a map with holes where an enemy line used to be. Years later, a freight train will cross a Midwestern night and a grandfather will pause, counting beats without knowing he's doing it. He will tell a child only this: listen for the truth inside the noise. That is the inheritance, industrial democracy learning to aim, then building enough to keep aiming until tyrannies ran out of time. 3 nights, 3 submarines, 6 in 13 days. Not miracle. Method. A republic turned to rhythm and found the war answering in the key of certainty.